quite a lot to the development of the kit. So greetings to all of you. As Priya said, we are approaching today's webinar as a sort of an overview of resources in the kit. One thing we've found is that even some people who have been using the kit for some time may not have had access to all of the resources that may be of use, especially because they have been harder to find. And we, again, hope that the website is going to help us to fix that problem. But I am going to start with just a very brief overview of the guidance and tools in the kit, and then we'll talk a bit about the supply kit. We hope that you'll use and keep this webinar as a kind of general guide to where all of the resources, what all of the resources in the kit are, and also sort of a logical way of going through them. If you already are very deeply familiar with the kit, we hope this webinar becomes a resource that you could pass on to your partners or new colleagues as an orientation that will sort of give them a quick guide to learning about everything. And we do, for anyone starting to use this kit for the first time, our strongest advice that we will repeat over and over, it's a good practice from those who have used this with a lot of success in the field, is to start by just going through the guidance first. Before you decide even if you're going to use the kit, as you decide is it the right tool for the job for you, as you decide what resources you're going to use, and before you decide if you're going to procure supply kits or procure supplies locally. For now, for those who are in UNICEF, all of these resources are available on the ADAP SharePoint, and anyone, UNICEF staff or INGO, are welcome to contact Priya, Ellen, or Christine, and their emails are at the end of this webinar. You're also welcome to contact me, but I would suggest starting with them first if you need these resources. So when we talk about what's in the kit, the first thing we are talking about is all of the guidance and tools, which are all available in PDF and other documents. Some are available in print form. And then we're also talking about the supply kit. So we always talk about all of those resources as being part of the kit. Also, I just want to apologize for find the typo on my slide on this first page, but we'll move on to the next slide. Great. So again, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the Adolescent Kit guidance and tools. And this is going to be a really quick overview of everything in the order that we suggest you review them. We don't have time, nor would it be a good use of your time for us to try to explain or treat this as an in-depth training on all of the resources. We really encourage you to read them yourselves and to provide them to your partners and colleagues. Hopefully you'll find them self-explanatory. Even though there are a lot, they're very quick and easy to browse and read. We do have them available in increasingly large numbers of languages. We have them in French and Arabic at the moment, and we're working on developing them and translating them into more UN languages. And there are some other languages that have been developed through translation at the local level. And again, hope you'll use this webinar as a reference in the future. Next slide. Thank you. So the first resource that I just want to remind all of you to look at and use is called the Quick Guide. It's just a small booklet. It is available electronically, and it gives you a visual overview of all of the resources in the kit, all of the guidance, and also the supplies and some of the other resources. And it also is a hard copy booklet inside the supply kit if you procure that. Next slide, please. Okay, next, if you're using the Adolescent Kit and browsing it for the first time, one resource that we suggest you use is the foundational guidance. And this is guidance that we developed with the idea that everyone using the Adolescent Kit in a program should be on the same page about their purposes for their programs, what are the outcomes and goals they hope that their program will address, why are they working for adolescents, and what approaches are they using. So this foundation guidance is really a booklet that we consider for use at the program design and management level. But we also consider it a resource that you might want to translate and share with the facilitators who are working directly with adolescents, or you may want to choose specific sections of it to either translate or adapt and then translate for use by the facilitators as well. Next slide. One of the first tools, and by the way, this is a slide, we know that you will not be able to read every word on this slide, but what we're hoping you can do is use this to recognize pages in the foundation guidance that may be of use to you. And one of the first pages in the foundational guidance that we hope may be useful is the introductory section, which is an overview of why UNICEF created a kit for adolescents' expression and innovation. It gives you the rationale for the kit. It gives you and anyone else reading and using it an overview of what's in the kit and also why it was developed as it was, why we chose this focus on expression and innovation, and what those have to do with some of the core situations that adolescents are in globally, especially in humanitarian situations, and what some of the outcomes that our programs might contribute to towards their human rights and towards their positive development and positive engagement. Next slide. And then really the heart of the entire adolescent kit is a framework of 10 key competencies for adolescents. And this is a framework that we consider an adaptable and flexible but core and foundational framework of outcomes for adolescents that the entire kit is designed to contribute to. So when we were thinking about what should a program for adolescents address, what positive changes might we be trying to contribute to for adolescents in all circumstances, but especially those in humanitarian settings, and especially those affected by conflict, especially those affected by other challenging circumstances, we thought of these 10 core, broad sets of skills, abilities, beliefs that are fundamental to their social and emotional well-being, they're fundamental to their learning, and they're fundamental to their positive engagement with the world around them. And the 10 competency domains, you can see, if you read them, you can see what I mean by them being broad, and I hope you can see what I mean by them being fundamental. Communication and expression, identity and self-esteem, down at the bottom, creativity and innovation. So I think you'll see what we mean. Some of you are very much working on programs that are directly addressed to these competencies. And these were developed through a lot of global desk reviews and consultations with partners and adolescents about what we thought the fundamental outcomes and changes for adolescents a program should contribute to. And you'll also see that these intersect with psychosocial well-being, these intersect with life skills, these intersect with the competencies and skills young people need and have the right to have and use as peace builders in their communities. They're part of the right to participation and so on. And a lot of country offices have done some interesting and exciting things with these competency domains. I'll also mention that these are the same 10 key competencies in the peace building toolkit that ADAP has also developed and that can be used in harmony with the adolescent kit and all the other resources. Next. The 10 key approaches are also a unified methodology and set of principles and standards and practices that we promote UNICEF and hope that you'll support all of your partners in using. We wanted to bring together standards, principles, practices, methods across all of the core sectors within which we work and especially within our human rights-based approach to programming. But we wanted to put them in a simple and action-oriented phrasing so that when you're communicating with your partners, you have a simple way of reminding them and advocating for good practices with adolescents. You'll also see that they have icons associated with them, and you'll see the icons and the approaches themselves referenced throughout all of the guidance materials, the guidance for program coordinators, such as yourselves and managers from your partner organizations, and also for facilitators. One section of this foundation guide that may be of use and that we have discovered gets sort of lost between the cracks sometimes are the technical notes in the foundation guide. And these technical notes answer a main question that comes to ADAP often by UNICEF country offices seeking to use the kit. And that's, is this a kit for, or how is this a kit for? For example, if you look over on the right side of the slide up in the top corner, we get these questions. Is this a kit for life skills? Is this a kit for right to participation? Is this a kit for gender equity? And what you'll see is that we have, do you need me to pause for a minute?
No.
Okay. You'll see that there's a technical note on each of those topics that helps to show how this adolescent kit can be used for programs with all of those principles at their heart or under these sectors or with these kinds of purposes. And in the middle is a sort of overarching technical note, understanding adolescence in humanitarian situations. We would suggest that you might use that if you need to advocate with your partners, even with your colleagues or with your donors, for why programming for adolescents in humanitarian situations or in any other low resource or challenging situation is important. We hope you could use this as a kind of advocacy note. You may find it's useful in reminding you or pointing out other elements of adolescent situation that you might be exploring or other elements that your program might be addressing, both in terms of the challenges and the opportunities that adolescents can face around the world. Next. Great. Okay, we're going to move on to a new section of the guidance now. This is another one that we found that a lot of people haven't seen or accessed. And when I say a lot of people, I do mean a lot of UNICEF staff, such as those who are on the call now, as well as those from partner organizations who are more in a management, supervisory, or coordination position. And that's the Program Coordinator's Guide. And this is a guide that is exactly what it sounds like. But just to clarify that when we speak of this guide, we are using the term Program Coordinator as a kind of umbrella term for anyone who may be in a management, coordination, design, supervisory, oversight, or training relationship with a program that's running activities for adolescents. So it's, again, program coordinators, probably many of you on this call, and there's so many different titles that we all have, even within UNICEF, but across our organizations, that we thought this was a good catch-all title. Next slide. Again, this is just to give you one example of the kinds of resources in the Program Coordinator's Guide. Overall, the guide provides you guidance and some tools that are aligned to each stage in the program cycle. So if you look over on the right side of the slide, you'll see this bullet point list sort of gives you the stages of the program cycle as we typically think of it, both in terms of UNICEF and all of our partners responding in humanitarian context and also just setting up programs in general. We usually start with the situation analysis. We think about reaching out to the most vulnerable young people, setting up programs, and then down at the bottom, actually, we gave some attention to this question of transitioning or ending programs, because most of our programs are not designed to last forever, and we wanted to give some suggestions for how you could think about what a transition might mean, or even closing programs when it's time to do that at the end of a humanitarian response. So just a reminder that in our humanitarian response, but also in all of our programs, we think about these steps in a program cycle, but the reality is we're often sort of always in the middle of a program cycle. And you could use this list and this guide to think at any part of your program how you might either be setting up a new program or setting up a new intervention using the resources in the Adolescent Kit, or how you might be strengthening or expanding or including adolescents through an ongoing program. I'll just mention one last thing on the program coordinator's guide. It's okay to go on to the next one, Ellen, thanks. But just on the program coordinator's guide, we really emphasize ways to engage and collaborate with adolescents, consulting them about their needs, and also giving them active and leadership roles in programs whenever that's possible. So there's a lot of guidance in the program coordinator's guide in that regard as well. The facilitator's guide, now onto this page, this is for the people who are leading activities with adolescents. Facilitator is the most typical term we find around the world, but this could also mean teachers. In some contexts we might be saying animators. Often we're saying volunteers or youth volunteers. Anyone working directly with adolescents, leading activities, supporting them, facilitating their activities, and working with them directly. Even though this guide is for facilitators, if you're in a design and leadership and coordination role, I hope you'll take a look at this, because of course you're going to be the ones figuring out how your facilitators will be working and supporting them in their role. So, and you may want to choose and adapt different sections of this guide as are relevant in your own contexts. Next slide, please. Great. The first section of the facilitator's guide has to do with forming what we call adolescent circles, but you can adapt this and call a circle or a group anything you want that's relevant in your context or that just works well in your programs. And so the first section of this guide gives facilitators suggestions for how to form a group of adolescents, who should be in a group together, who sometimes, in some regards, we want very mixed groups, especially to include those with disabilities and without in the same group. And in some regards, you may want some same groupings. For example, you may want younger adolescents together and older adolescents in a different group. In some cases, having separate groups for girls and boys can be a best practice for many reasons. So there are all kinds of suggestions in the first section of the facilitator's guide in that regard. Next slide. I won't take a lot of time on this slide, but I hope that you and your colleagues might. One of the most effective practices that we found is creating structure for the time that adolescents spend together, even or especially if it's a more unstructured program. Setting up a set of predictable steps that adolescents have every time they come together, and then every time they're getting ready to leave and go back to their homes or spaces or residence. And there's a short training video hyperlinked to this if you want to learn more about that. I'd suggest taking time with that rather than my taking more time with this slide right now. Yes. Just a moment to explain one of the most unusual and different parts of the way we designed the Adolescent Kit for you. One important understanding is that this Adolescent Kit does not include preset modules or a manual of activities for facilitators. Instead, this facilitator's guide, together with the activity box, gives suggestions for facilitators to create and plan their own modules using a huge range of activities that are all written out, that are part of the kit as well. And we call those phases, and I'm going to explain those phases in a few minutes, but I just wanted to call attention to this now. So the facilitator's guide gives this guidance to facilitators with your support as program support coordinators, we hope, for how they can plan and carry out their own modules of activities based on the interests of the adolescents with which they work, based on the programming context, based on the maturity of the adolescents and whether they have more need for challenge or more need for simple fun and games, and based on the overall objectives of your program. So the facilitator's guide, you may want to take a look at that. That would also help you to understand what's different and maybe a little less predictable about the entire kit. Also why we designed it the way we did. So I'll come back to a slide that looks like this in a minute. But yeah, you can go on. Great. And now let's just talk about another core resource in the Adolescent Kit, which is what we call the activity box. And the activity box is a file with 90 guides actually for all different activities that facilitators can lead with adolescents, and they're all addressed to some of those 10 key competencies that we mentioned on the first slide. And again, they're all presented individually. They're not in a curriculum guide with modules, and facilitators would build their own curriculum modules, or you can build this curriculum for them using the 4 phases approach. Also, you can add and integrate other activities or other manuals if you have wonderful learning resources for your program, or if you're, and especially if you're working with partners that have developed their own manuals. These activity guides, the fact that they're presented individually, is meant to encourage and support you in integrating other resources as you see fit. Next slide, please. And just to mention that we developed the activity box like a recipe box. If this is familiar to any of you, that's actually my mother's recipe box. So with different cards that you can pick and choose as you want and sort of build your own menu of activities instead of having a menu pre-written for you. Next slide. Great. So the activity guides, this slide shows you the 3 different examples of kinds of activity guides in the box. So on the left, you'll see that there are activity guides. There are 50 of those. And those, as you'll see, are longer explanations, longer instructions for more complex activities to carry out and lead with adolescents. And those 50 vary quite a bit in complexity. Some are still pretty simple and fun. We hope they're all fun, but some are still pretty simple, and some are more complex, and you would want to put them together in a sequence that flows together. On the right, in the pink, you'll see we have energizers. I'm sure I don't need to explain to anybody on this call what an energizer is. It's just a short, fun, warm-up activity. Again, we hope they're fun. It's up to you and the adolescents to decide. I'll also just mention, though, we call them energizers, but some are very active for adolescents, and then some are more calming, because we've learned from our colleagues in child protection that that's important for psychosocial practice, that young people need a really good mix of warm-up activities, but they also need to learn how to calm and relax themselves, especially when they're under stress. And then third, down at the bottom, are these simple, small inspiration cards. And you'll see just the front and back of one example. And you'll see that if you look at the instructions, it's very simple. And these are just to give facilitators or even adolescents themselves some simple ideas for activities that they can carry out, and they can figure out themselves how they want to carry them out, what would work. And these are just to give ideas and add some support for facilitators trying to come up with ideas for adolescents when they're leading a lot of activities. Next slide. Okay, just to go back to the phase approach. And again, now you've seen the activities card, and I just want to remind you that the activities, as you've heard me say many times, it's really for you, the facilitators, and even with the adolescents, to build modules for the adolescents and then to adapt them as you go along. Take a look at the top right-hand corner. This is the first what we call activity phase. Some adolescents, especially when they're getting together for the first time, and sometimes forever or for the duration of your program, they just need to have fun together. They want to do simple fun and games, activities, quiet, calming activities. We may be, in some context, seeing different adolescents on different days. So that's starting our circle is a module made that you can build entirely of energizers. Just short, fun activities to give adolescents a break from stress and something fun to do. Moving down to the bottom right-hand corner, the next phase is knowing ourselves. And those are somewhat more in-depth activities for adolescents who maybe are in a context for a longer period of time, ready to develop some vocabulary for expressing themselves, practice some art skills for different ways to express their feelings, to talk about who they are, their sense of identity, but still may not be ready or interested in more challenging or complex activities. Moving on to connecting in the left corner, a more mature adolescents those who have been working together in teams for some time, those who may feel ready and curious to make more friends or connect with the adults around them or explore their communities, may be ready for the connecting phase. This is a phase in which you might use more techniques like interviewing, exploring, community mapping, team building, also some conflict transformation skills like negotiation and responding to different situations. That's the connecting module. And then up at the top left-hand corner is taking action. And in some contexts, especially with older adolescents, especially with those who've been in one situation for a long time, especially for those who are ready to work together as a team, they may be ready to design projects themselves that they carry out, explore and discuss issues in their community that are of concern to them, work together as a team, even work together fairly independently with minimal support from a facilitator. So the activities in the whole kit, all 90, can be used in different ways to build modules based on those four phases, depending on the needs of the adolescents. Next slide. Okay, I won't take time on this, but this is a guide to how to read an activity card, what information of it is available on each. Next. Okay, now we're on to the supply kit. And before we even talk about the supply kit, I wanted to remind and inform all of you that there is a supply guide. And if you're thinking about procuring the supplies, or if you're not sure, I would suggest browsing the supplies guide on the electronic version when you get all of the other resources. It includes a lot of information about what's in the kit, so it's sort of like if you're ordering anything else from a catalog, you can and should look at a list of what's in the kit, and you can find that in the supplies guide. And it also includes some guidance and suggestions for how you could procure supplies at the local level, and thoughts about whether that might be the best approach for your situation, the most efficient, the most cost-effective, and so on. It'll also give you some suggestions for those who do go on to procure supply kits for how to assemble and use it and manage it. Next. Okay, so there again, one resource in the supplies guide is a long list of everything that's in the supply kit. There it is. That's just 2 pages of it. There are a few more. Next slide. Here's another resource in the supplies kit that I hope you might look at, which is creating your own set of supplies. Please take a look at this if you are considering ordering the supply kit, and think about whether you could create your own supplies and whether it might be more cost effective and feasible to do so in your context. Okay, and now I'm going to show you a few images of the supply kit, what it looks like when it's assembled and put together, but probably more importantly, what it looks like when you first receive it, and some thoughts about how to organize and manage it and distribute it to your partners. And so, by the way, on the right-hand side is those are 2 carrying cases from 1 supply kit. So that's not 2 kits there, that's 2 parts of 1 supply kit. And we'll talk more about the carrying cases. And also on the left is the designer, the gentleman on the left-hand side with the backpack. He was the designer of the kit, Jason. So give him a little praise right now. Next slide, please. And here are some more pictures of what some of the different main components of the kit look like when they're put together in the field. Next slide, please. Great, and now here, if you've ever wondered what Ellen on the left or Priya on the right look like, there they are. And this is their office, so that's what headquarters look like, very exciting office. And here, these are just a few pictures of what it looks like when you open and receive supply kits. So first of all, that is what one supply kit looks like when you receive it from Copenhagen. And you can see it's one large flat packed box, and you can also see that it's a bit chaotic in that box. And this is a big warning and strong recommendation. Here is what we very strongly encourage you to do if you're procuring supplies and opening them for the first time. First of all, do procure 1 kit for yourselves to keep at your main office. And you may want, UNICEF, if you may want to also provide one sample kit to the managers or trainers or coordinators at your main partner organizations, so that they have a sense of what's inside it and how to use it and how to assemble it. But a very strong encouragement and warning is please don't please ask your partners not to open the kits until they are fully distributed to sort of the main centers or program spaces where they will be used. And a related warning is that that cardboard box, it's not meant for long-term storage. We'll encourage you to find some storage space, and we would encourage your partners to do the same. So before they even open the kits, each of those kits in those boxes, find some storage space where they'll be keeping some of the supplies. These kits are really meant for you to have a place where you might be able to store some supplies, and then to carry out, for the facilitators with the adolescents, just to carry out what they'll need on any given day to work with adolescents and then carry it back. So it's not like those other UNICEF kits with those big metal storage boxes. So that's an important warning. Next slide, please. When you open that box, and when your partners do the same thing, please look for these first, and please keep this webinar and these photographs as a reference, because that's what we hoped it would be useful in the long term. You'll want to reach for that supplies guide, and we hope you've already looked at it online, but there it is in the box in hard copy. I think you'll find it useful to reach for that quick guide as a reminder of all of the electronic resources. And then tiny little flash drive, like a needle in a haystack in that huge box. But look for that, because that has all of the guidance available electronically, and some other files you may find useful if you do translation at your level. It also has the videos for those who don't have a lot of bandwidth, all those training videos that I've been mentioning along the way. So look for these 3 things first and put them somewhere you'll be able to find them as you keep sorting through everything in the box. Next slide, please. Great. And then here's a second batch of resources that we suggest you find and kind of put together when you open that box. And what you can see is that the supply kits include some, not all, of the guidance available to you in print form. They're actually, by the way, on really nice sturdy paper, so it won't break down quickly if you're carrying it out to the field, or if it gets wet, or you drop it in a mud puddle, or someone steps on it, or all the other things that can happen in a program. We prioritized printing things that we thought either you might want to have handy quickly, like the supply guide, like the quick guide, and also resources that we thought your facilitators might be using on a daily basis. So all of those activity guides are available in print form, and they are right now available in English. I know that's not accessible to many of you, or to your, more importantly, to your facilitators in the field at the moment. So it was a place to start, and ADAP is working on developing more in more different languages and so on. So it's an imperfect solution, but we hope it was a start in the right direction. But take a look, because you should also look for those blue binders. Sometimes we call them box files. You see what I mean on the large photograph on the left side, those binders, and then look at those 4 sort of loop hooks. Those are easy to sort of get lost in the shuffle, but they're really handy, and they'll help you to put everything together, as you can see on the bottom right-hand corner. So please, again, keep that photo as a reference for sort of one batch of things to put together, and when you're opening and unpacking that kit. Next slide, please. Great. And then the main part of what's in the kit is a whole lot of stationery. We specifically chose stationery that we thought would be really useful for adolescents as they carry out activities together of any kind, simple art projects, expression activities, or group work together. So again, you can see these are all the different kinds of supplies you'll get. That white thing up at the top, that is one very big roll of white paper. Hopefully that would last a long time. And lots of pencils, lots of other paper, rulers, and other resources. So again, you and your partners will want to have a place to store those things when you unpack those boxes. Next slide. Great, and here in action, also Ellen, showing you what a facilitator tablet looks like. By the way, we've gotten some confusion from some comments and recommendations from from all of you that we should clarify what we mean by the facilitator tablet. Some people thought it might mean that there was an iPad or something like that in the kit, which there is not. We only put very simple, inexpensive materials in because we know that sometimes if you include more expensive electronics in the field, first, we might put adolescents at risk if they're responsible for them. Secondly, they may break quickly and then they're not useful. But this tablet is actually a little box for use by facilitators as they work with and lead activities with adolescents. So you can see it's got a little rope for the facilitator to wear it so they can walk around. And one function that Ellen is showing is it can be used as a small marker board with a little, by attaching a little piece of plastic to it that's part of the kit. And then the second in the middle, all of those activity guides, the facilitators can attach those to the facilitator tablet, or even they could also put a piece of paper, but they're notes for what activity they're going to lead and the steps they're going to take. I'm a former teacher, many of you know who have worked with me. I love this. Jason designed this for the facilitators to help them do what they need to do well, and I think it's a great idea to have those steps available for your reference. And the last thing is for facilitators, they may want to hold some materials, their own marker. And you notice I put those sharp scissors on top of that. We wanted to include sharp scissors in the kit because adolescents, older adolescents, can use them safely and may need them for their projects. And we know from them they feel put off by seeing those little scissors for children. But at the same time, we also know that in complex and chaotic environments, we can't just leave sharp scissors lying around. Sometimes there will be little children available. So this was a nice compromise. The facilitators could hold those scissors safely so they're not just sort of lost in the shovel, but give them to adolescents. So just to give you an idea of how that facilitator tablet can be used in practice. Next slide. Okay. Again, keep this slide for reference. All of those are the materials you'll find in the adolescent kit when you open that big supply box. That rope and all those random little metal hooks, they look like they could be just regular stationery or something, but they serve important functions for the adolescent, for the facilitator tablet and putting it together. And you can learn more through a video that's on your flash drive and that's hyperlinked into this presentation. Next slide. Okay, and then there are the large and small carrying cases and pods. If you've seen a picture of the adolescent kit, that's probably what you've seen and wondered, what it is or what it's for. These we designed to really promote the idea of facilitators and all of us moving outside of our spaces to get to adolescents in the places that are accessible to them and where we can especially reach and work with those who are the most vulnerable and hard to reach. Because one of the things we know from working with adolescents and youth around the world is the ones who need our support the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, often cannot get to the spaces, the nice structured safe spaces that we or sometimes our government partners may have built for them. So we still want to use those spaces, those are valuable and important, but we also want to get beyond them. And in some of the countries in which there are resources available and supplies, country offices have nonetheless used these as a way to kind of promote this new kind of practice of getting outside spaces safely and supportively. So that's just to give you a sense of that. Ellen, could you click the next slide? Great. Here's one example also that these big carrying cases have multi-purpose functions, and one of them is that you can make them into a portable whiteboard. And so you can see that's, again, Priya and Ellen showing how that works. Notice the four sort of what we call binder clips, those black clips. You clip a piece of plastic to that board, and then you can hang it up using the same straps that you use to carry it around. And by the way, this is actually in some ways even better than a regular marker board because you can use normal permanent markers on the special kind of plastic that's included in the adolescent kit, and you can still erase it. So the kit includes a whole lot of dry erase markers, but it also includes permanent markers and some cleaning fluid. So you don't risk destroying your marker board, as I personally have done in my own offices by writing on it with permanent marker. If you write on it with permanent marker, you can still wipe that off. And we know that that's also something, a marker board is something facilitators and adolescents really need if they're going to be anywhere working on group activities together. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's all of the materials that you do need to put together the pods, the carrying cases. By the way, there are 2 large carrying cases and 1 small one that can be worn as a backpack. And those little pods go inside them so you can organize and carry the supplies you might need for adolescents on a given day. I'll also just give you one more reminder, though. You can't fit all of the resources in all of that stationery into these 4 carrying cases. I mean, it may be possible, but it's not easy, and it's not probably the optimal way to use this. So you'll want to have a storage space for everything. And I just want to mention one other thing. These are inexpensive materials. They're replaceable. In some contexts we've used them. You open them up and the adolescents will either sit right down on them or they'll use them to write against, and that's great. They're meant to be used. Adolescents should use them in the ways that make sense to them. And we wanted them to be something that's not so valuable or precious that we have to somehow protect it from the adolescents. We wanted it to be something that the adolescents could use and enjoy, and that we could replace if we really needed to. Great. Now on this, Priya, did you want to talk about this slide? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks, Juliet. That's been fantastic. And thanks, everyone, for your enthusiasm in asking all of the questions. We're now getting towards the ending of this session, and we'll soon take question and answers. But this slide was put together for you by Ellen and myself. So we wanted to try and share with you a template or a process for ordering the kits, specifically for UNICEF country offices that are in need of support, either to discuss how many quantities you should get, how many you should replenish, whether you should internationally procure the kit or locally procure some of the items. So Ellen and I are here to help you with those questions, and of course look at your specific requests, specifically if UNICEF country offices are in need of funding. But we will, because we do have requests coming in from some countries now and we're really trying to promote the kit, we do want to have some order in the process, just so that we have a better way of assessing how many quantities, how many country offices we can support, because we're working out of a very limited budget, but we're really thankful for the funding and support from UNICEF USA as well for the fact that we can help you procure some of the kits and also support some of the rollout and in-country trainings. Again, like I said, we have a very limited availability of funding, so we ask you to be very realistic in what you can and would like to procure. For country offices who are quite familiar with the kit, do think about local procurement. You might have all of the materials already, but what you really need is the supplies, which are really easy and cheap in your countries and local markets. But sometimes countries, specifically in acute crises, find that the local materials may be very expensive and they prefer international procurement, or country offices may think they want to have very few quantities procured internationally, check out the kit, see what it's like, what is included in it as a sample, and then procure the rest locally. So there are various combinations we are asking and encouraging country offices to assess. Please assess your situation, specifically regarding international versus local procurement. We will be sharing this template, which we've already put in the slide with you, where we just need a few sentences from you on the rationale, on your quantities needed, on the costs for the kit. So usually supply division, and we will provide you the contact names of colleagues to contact. Supply division provides you with the freight costs, the shipment costs, And it's good for you to know that there are 7 kits in one pallet, and supply division prefers that you order in full pallets. So you don't order 3 kits or 4 kits, you order a pallet at least, so that they can try to get you, it's easier to ship out pallets rather than single or half kits. Then they can also provide you with the shipment costs. And sometimes if they're very small quantities, it's better to ask them for sea freight and air freight and compare which one is cheaper. Depending on your quantity, we might ask you to share with us or cost share with us that ADAP pays for the actual cost of the kit, and the country offices covers the shipment. That's what was the practice in the past, and that helped us reach out and help many more country offices. However, do let us know the funding situation in your country and we can work around it. And like we've already said, for local procurement, please look into your availability of these supplies. If you need to brainstorm with us, we're here. We can have a call and look through the other aspects. And then once Ellen and I receive the quantities and requests from country offices, we can then assess how much and how many kits we can support for each country, and we can get back to you. And the procurement process will then be handled between the country office and supply division directly, and we will provide you with the funding information. And we will ask you very quickly to just share with us what you're intending to do with the kit when you get it. What types of trainings are you planning to do? Are you planning to do any preparedness related work? Are you doing it actually for a humanitarian response taking place? If you've already been implementing the kit but are in need of more quantities, this is the kind of information we want to try and get from you. So don't wait. Do send us a note. Try to fill in the template. Even if you don't get the template from us, the questions are very simple. They're right here. You can fill it out and send it to Ellen or myself. And we will repeat this particular information again tomorrow. Next slide. Okay, so now we are on the question and answer session. Thank you so much, Juliet and Ellen and Christine, for supporting this webinar. Thank you everyone for connecting with us. So we all now have access to our Word document in which Christine's been helping us highlight some of the questions that have come from you all. So if you want, Juliet, over to you to answer to some of the questions that have come in that we've not covered.
Great. So the first question that I, by the way, we're just choosing 3 questions for starters, and if we have time for another, we'll take that. We're responding specifically to some questions that have not yet been answered in chat, but with all of this is with the caveat that if you continue to have questions now or anytime, please reach out to all of us, especially to Priya, and because ADAP wants to know what your questions are and address them, whether now and in the webinar. And also as a reminder, we will also be doing another webinar tomorrow that may address some of the questions that you have now or that may come up later. The first question is there a training available for the last phase of project-based activities, and will those training videos also be available publicly? So I think it would be wonderful to have more training videos in general, and I think that's a great suggestion for a topic. And it's wonderful, by the way, when country offices and partners make these kinds of suggestions, because it's actually easier for HQ to respond when the requests like this come from the field and come from colleagues at the country level. There is not a video of that sort available yet. However, let me mention a couple of things. One, take a look at the facilitator's guide and the guidance about the 4 activities phases. You may find that reading the last section about the take action phase gives more ideas and suggestions of how that can work and what it looks like. There's even a tool for facilitators in the facilitator toolbook and guidance that gives some ideas for different kinds of projects that adolescents might work on of lesser and greater complexity. Although most importantly, one concept in that module, in that phase rather, is that we would really want adolescents themselves to be coming up with their own ideas for projects that really interest them. So please look at the facilitator guide for more active ideas for now. I'll also mention, and I'm mentioning this to Priya and the ADAP team as I do so, I've had the privilege of working on some developing some of the phases and supporting country offices in developing some modules based on, among other things, Take Action. I had the good luck to work on that with Turkey, a bit with the Philippines, and also with Tajikistan, and there are surely other interesting examples from other country offices. So one thing that I'm hoping we'll be able to do is share some of the modules and some of the learning from those country level experiences. I think many of you would actually find that's probably the best way to learn, is just learn from other colleagues in the field. So I'll talk with Priya, and I will also talk with colleagues in the Turkey and Tajikistan office about whether we might be sharing the resources they've developed at their country offices at the global level as resources to learn more.
And thanks, Juliet. Just on that, I'm looking at Christine in our room because she's been hard at work on the website. And the website is being designed not just to place the materials and the modules that we have, that country offices have developed as well, but it's also to really encourage that lessons learned and information sharing across country offices. So of course, once the website is up and running, we will always be trying to populate it with good and recent examples from all of you on how you are adapting the kit, and maybe what's useful in Indonesia could be used in Philippines, what's used in Tajikistan could be used by another country, and that's really our aim, to foster that learning among partners and among countries. And so again, please bear with us while the website comes up, but the intention is to have all those materials there. And with that, I'll just take the opportunity to also mention that we are translating the kit with Ellen's help and due diligence on Arabic, which is already final. Please contact Ellen should you need the files for the Arabic version of the kit. She can at least share it with you via WeTransfer while the website is coming up, and eventually when the website is up, you will find the Arabic version to download there. And upcoming will also be French and Spanish versions, which will take a few weeks longer. But we should again have them available to you all soon. The quality assurance process is quite time consuming, and a huge thanks to the Lebanon Country Office and the MENA Regional Office for giving us very good recommendations on who to work with as translators. The kit has 256 plus files to be translated from English to that particular language, and requires a lot of due diligence and thoroughness to see whether the translations are making sense and is in line with what UNICEF uses in our training. So the Lebanon office had helped us, Abir, who's online, had helped us quality assure the entire Arabic version with the LTA partner that we have, and Lacro is helping us with the Spanish version, and also on the French we are in touch with DOC and colleagues. So we're doing the needful, and hopefully other than Arabic, which is already available, you will find French and Spanish available on the website soon.
And I'll just mention too that I'm delighted to see that Tiziana in Indonesia is offering to share her resources. They've done such rich work in that country, and one of several that have done rich work, but I think that's a wonderful example. Please also consider watching the recording of the webinar from July 19th. That was, there were many wonderful examples of country offices that work, including Indonesia. Also, tomorrow I'll be talking, well, we all will, but I'll be here talking about how to adapt and use the kit in different program entry points and program contexts. So we'll talk a little bit more about the translation suggestions tomorrow, and also give a few more country examples. So, great. And great, may I go on to the next question?
Yes.
Oh, great. So the next question I'm going to go on to is the one about gender mainstreaming. Does the kit have any tips for gender mainstreaming? Yes, 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 very strongly so. And I will point to 3 places. First of all, this is a perfect place to look in the foundation guidance at those technical notes. There's a technical note on the adolescent kit and gender equity that gives sort of some cover, not only guidance, but also a strong mandate that we should always be gender mainstreaming and inclusive in all of our programming. And in fact, I'll give the same answer to both the gender mainstreaming and the disability question that comes next, are the recommendations for disability and inclusion. So there is a technical note on gender equity, there is a technical note on disability, I'll highlight that we worked closely with the disability team throughout the entire development of the Adolescent Kit. And you'll find guidance not just in one section of the kit, but throughout the entire kit on how to make sure that you're using best gender equity practices and adapting those because they may be different in different contexts. And also in using the kit inclusively to make sure that we do reach young people with disabilities. So you'll start with please do start with those technical notes in the foundation guide, but also just keep an eye out throughout the entire adolescent kit. Yeah. Great. So I'm noticing that there's a lot of requests for integration of livelihoods activities linked with the rollout of the kit. Is there any experience on this? The first thing I would say is one of the strongest pieces of guidance that we get from our colleagues, not only within UNICEF but beyond in our partner organizations on livelihoods, is that often this really needs to be adapted in very tailored ways into different programming and field contexts. Because an important requirement of livelihoods programming is that if we're offering the possibility that participating in a program might transform someone's opportunities for livelihoods, we need to be linking that to real possibilities for what economic participation, entrepreneurship, market realities, work realities are going to look like, and those are very different in very different countries. So we have not yet integrated livelihoods activities into the adolescent kit, because we did start with an awareness that of risk, to put it very honestly, that if we start with the wrong approaches and suggest things as livelihood activities, they may not work in different contexts, and then we're really not upholding our responsibilities to adolescents. That said, the idea of linking and integrating livelihoods activities into programs using the Adolescent Kit is a wonderful one, but I would encourage that be adapted and tailored in the field. Priya, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just to say that, Victoria, no simple answer for this, but just to say that it would then have to link up with what the country office and partners are doing in your overall work around adolescence, within the country, rather than it being a very set aside and a solo aspect. So either not only the work that UNICEF is engaged in, but what other partners are engaged in. And like Juliet said, there can be some innovative ways of including exercises around the livelihoods aspect. I think one aspect would be to link up with partners who are working on this and linkages. But if you are very interested in integrating livelihood activities linked and have ideas on exercises that you can integrate within the kit, maybe we can have a side chat with Juliet on trying to brainstorm some ideas that may be within the realm of our overall work, as long as it fits within your country programs, overall priorities and interventions.
Yeah, maybe I'll just piggyback on that and just make a general comment for anyone who's curious about sort of why we developed the kit the way we did. Is one thing that we tried to do was be faithful to our mandate and also the limits of our mandate at the HQ level. That, we knew that at the HQ level we should not be developing a program, because there's no one program at the global level that's going to work universally at the country level, that you at the country level are the experts in what the needs are and what the right interventions are. And that's why we developed this as a toolkit that was adaptable for use and meant also for adaptation through different programs at the country level. So that's just another way to explain sort of why there are some resources, and then there are other things that we do think might come best from your partners at the global level and or at the regional level, depending on your situation and also depending on your program goals. I'm going to move on to the next question, if that's okay, on the monitoring and evaluation tools and framework, especially for the facilitators with low-level literacy. So I'm just going to unpack that question in a couple of ways. One is generally to talk about low-level literacy. I will mention that the activities themselves, every single one of the activity guides includes a little icon that will tell you whether it can be used with low-level literacy adolescents or whether it requires some high level of literacy. But most of the activities were developed with either low literacy adolescents in mind and or with the possibility of adapting an activity so that it could be used with low-level literacy. We know that adolescents affected by a humanitarian context and in general around the world are all over the board. We've worked in places where there are brilliant, high-capacity young people, but they've not had a chance to learn to read and write at a high level, or they're speaking multiple different languages, or some are coming from very high levels of formal education. So we really wanted the activities to be those that could reach the most and include the most young people. So if the question is about the activities in low-level literacy, please look at the activities and you'll note there are even specific guides for how most of them can be adapted. If your facilitators have low levels of literacy, hopefully you'll find that the activities include some guides and some icons and visual materials that help them to navigate the activities in such a way that they can carry them out with adolescents. You may want to consider how you adapt, choose, and use specific activities from the box that are going to be the most feasible with facilitators in your context. And again, that's going to depend on different contexts. I would say that one challenge that we experience around the world is that adolescents, in order to be developing and using some of these competencies at a high level, they don't necessarily need literacy, but they do need some level of complexity to the activity itself, and how we implement it will matter in terms of how well they develop those skills. So you may want to think about how you can support facilitators in getting to the level of complexity in implementing an activity that is really needed for it to have the outcome that we're hoping for adolescents. And then in terms of monitoring and evaluating or supporting facilitators, in the program coordinator's guide, you'll find a lot of resources for you to think about how to support, train, monitor, etc. your facilitators, and in terms of helping to make sure that they're carrying out the facilitation in the ways that are going to be supportive for adolescents. In terms of a monitoring and evaluation toolkit or framework for the competencies themselves, for measuring whether adolescents are developing the competencies themselves, I believe that ADAP is still trying to develop a toolkit and some resources, but that may not be coming next week. It may take some time. For now, you can find resources in the following two places. One is you can find monitoring and evaluation tools, again, in the Program Coordinator's Guide, especially in the first two sections of the guidance. And you could also look to the Peace Building Toolkit that also follows the same framework of the framework of competencies in the Adolescent Kit. By the way, we don't have just one toolkit or framework, because there again, it's going to be you at the country level who's determining which competencies you might be emphasizing, which elements of the competencies you might be emphasizing, and also sort of what your starting point and goal points are with the adolescents. Those are going to be very different in different places. For example, if you're developing communication skills with your adolescents, it may be very different categories of communication skills in different contexts. So it's more a toolkit for you to develop your own monitoring and evaluation resources, less a global toolkit, because again, this isn't just one program, it's a toolkit for use in different programs.
But for those who wish to also navigate and explore the Peace Building Toolkit, we will try to include a link for all of you to access, again, on our ADAPT SharePoint site, at least for the country offices. And once the website is up, we will upload the Peace Building Toolkit, which will hopefully have more tools and ways for you to apply your implementation and monitoring activities in country.
Great. I just want to respond to one quick question that's not on the board, and then I'll come back to one that is. I just wanted to mention that in the Foundation Guide, there's a long list of other program resources and hyperlinked. So I noticed that there's a question from Victoria. Hi, Victoria, about the UNFPA tool. That may be linked there, and otherwise we can help you track that down, and or I would encourage putting that on the website.
So Victoria, on the UNFPA tool, I know of the Adolescent Sexual Reproductive Health Toolkit, but I don't know if Angela Marshall is online today, but IRC has developed a safe package that they also have piloted in some countries, I believe in northern Nigeria as well. And that package is referencing the adolescent kit, but also looks into the sexual reproductive health and gender-based violence related aspects with adolescents, specifically girls. And IRC has approached our section to see how the two kits or how the two tools can be complementary to one another, and how we can promote the use of both the tools in each other's trainings and sessions. So it's not an overlap as such. It's really meant to be a complementary it can be used as a complementary tool as well with country offices, specifically for those offices where we feel the need to work more with adolescent girls, specifically on health and protection related challenges and concerns. So I'm supposed to have that conversation with IRC, and they will we will then be able to get access to the safe materials. That's what it's called, the safe package, SAFE. And once we have access to that, I can share that with all of you, but hopefully with some guidance from IRC on how the adolescent kit and the safe curriculum or materials could be used as a tag to each other. Thanks.
I wanted to just ask one quick question. Are there activities that adolescents themselves can use as peer facilitators with their peers? Absolutely, yes. Tomorrow we'll share an example from Bhutan they've done rich work with peer facilitation, and they're an especially rich example, but there are others as well. I think if you read through the facilitator guide and also browse the activities, I hope that it'll just sort of pop out at you as different ways that adolescents could use those. But yes, absolutely, peer-to-peer facilitation, peer-to-peer support is a method that we would strongly encourage and that the adolescent kit should work well for. Again, tomorrow we will talk more about those kinds of program entry points. And then just to come back to this question on gender in the foundation guidance, again, I hope that as you read the entire resource, you'll find lots of notes on gender equity and inclusion, including diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. I don't know that we have anything specifically on those two categories, because in general the kit is not about it is less about sort of information on contents, and it's more about facilitating skills. But I think that you'll find that gender equity that would encompass those of different sexual orientations and those of different gender identities would be reflected in ways to make sure that the kit and its use are inclusive and truly equitable in all kinds of contexts. Disabilities too, there's the technical note, but you will find references, for example, even in the activities guide. Each of them includes recommendations for how to adapt the activity itself for adolescents of different abilities. And we also want to mention that peace building and conflict transformation is a technical note, but it's also the peace building and do no harm practices are reflected explicitly throughout all of the guidance. And that includes not necessarily specific considerations for those of different ethnic identities or communities, but specific recommendations that we should be always thinking inclusively and also thinking about essentially what we might consider social cohesion and integrating and making sure that we are using the kit in ways that build the inclusion of all young people of all communities, especially those that might be historically or currently marginalized, especially those that are less reached by our programs, and building respect and connection between diverse adolescents as a long-term perspective towards peace building and conflict transformation.
Thanks, Juliet. And I wanted to answer one question from Mavzuna on the Russian version. So yes, good point, Mavzuna, and well noted. But we've now noted that it's quite a hard task and requires a lot of work. We have 3 simultaneous translations happening. The Arabic one just got completed and 2 others. Maybe we will get to other translations at a later stage in a very limited adapt team and also funding. But good point and well noted, so that we can also try to cover and get the kit out to many other countries and regions. So sorry, I don't have a very specific answer on when this will happen, but we'll definitely discuss with Jumana and try to work on it. Thanks.
Great.
And for other country offices who have interest in Russian or other languages, please again write to Ellen, copy to myself, so that we can keep a note on countries that do want to take this forward, or countries where you think this could really be useful. That will also help us to make our case better in-house, and also when we report to the donor. Okay, with that, I think we have covered, I'm looking around, I think we've covered most of the questions for today. Don't forget, we will be repeating or recapping some of this information in the very early minutes of the second day presentation tomorrow by Juliet, and moving on to then, as she mentioned, about applying and adapting the kit in a different programming context. That will also be really interesting for some of you to learn from each other's examples, and we are going to be discussing some very exciting country examples tomorrow that you all can also be able to use and apply in your own settings or adapt accordingly. And once again, just to repeat, we will be sharing the final recordings and presentations with everybody, but please hang on until after tomorrow, because we prefer to do it together for day 1 and day 2, so that you all have everything in one email that you can share with partners and others as well, so that they can access all the resources all at once. So that will be coming to you later on in the week, but first let's get through day 2 of the presentation. Any questions that we have missed out or aren't able to answer today, or something that comes up in your mind later on as you go through your day or evening, please keep it so that you can bring it in the chat box tomorrow as well. This is a 2-part series technical webinar, so it doesn't get over today. This was just part 1. Part 2 starts tomorrow. We really hope you are able to tune in, because we have a lot of new and exciting content for you waiting tomorrow as well. So we're really hoping to have you all participate. I think in total, looking at Christine, but we had 18 plus country offices and HQ sections participating today, along with 21 external partners, so 21 country offices and HQ sections along with the external partners. So that's a great turnout, specifically because this was targeted for countries using the kit. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And with that, we're 1 minute ahead of time. So thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.